In 1864, a soldier standing guard outside a building in central London saw a white figure floating towards him in the dark alley. He challenged it. It didn't stop. So he did what any trained soldier would do. He ran at it with his bayonet. The weapon passed straight through. He was later court-martialed for abandoning his post. But when two witnesses came forward and said they'd watched the whole thing from a window, he was acquitted. That building? Still standing, still open to the public, and it's number 1 on today's list. We're counting down 15 of the most haunted houses in the United Kingdom, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll be sleeping with the lights on. Let's go. The United Kingdom is old. Thousands of years of wars, executions, plagues, and power struggles have soaked into its stone walls. Every crumbling castle, every timber-framed inn, every grand country house carries the weight of what happened inside it. And sometimes, according to stories passed down for centuries, what happened inside never quite left. This isn't just a ghost list. These are real places with real histories. Some of the stories have been debunked, some have been confirmed by archaeology, and some nobody can explain. We start small, very small, because number 15 isn't a castle or a palace, it's a cottage. A tiny little cottage in a quiet Essex village called St. Osyth, and it has one of the most sinister histories of any building on this list. The Cage. That's what it's called, and it earned the name. This small building was used as a village lockup, the kind of place you threw troublemakers while you decided what to do with them. And in 1582, the village of St. Osyth had a very big decision to make about a woman named Ursula Kemp. Ursula was accused of witchcraft. She was tried, convicted, and hanged. She was one of several women executed in what became one of the earliest and most significant witch trials in English history. The Cage sat at the heart of it all. Fast forward to 2004, when a woman named Vanessa Mitchell bought the property. On the very first day she moved in, she saw a dark shadow figure standing in the corner of a room she hadn't unpacked. There was nothing there that could have cast that shape. Over the years that followed, Vanessa reported disembodied voices, objects moving on their own, and being physically pushed by something she couldn't see. She eventually moved out. In 2025, the cottage was bought by Amy Wayne and Jared Cutting, the couple behind the YouTube channel Amy's Crypt. Ghost hunters. They bought a haunted house on purpose. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's something undeniably unsettling about a building where women were held before being taken to their deaths. Some things get into the walls. Some things don't leave. Number 14 is a story that comes with an archaeological twist. Because at most of these locations you just have a ghost story. Here, you have the ghost story, and then the ground itself actually backed it up. Maesmore Hall is a timber-framed manor house deep in the Welsh countryside in Powys. It's been here since at least the 17th century, and it operates today as a hotel. Guests come for the peace and quiet of rural mid-Wales. Some of them leave with considerably more than that. For years, staff and visitors have reported the same thing. Roman soldiers. Not one or two, a whole column of them, marching in formation through the hotel grounds, carrying lances, round shields, short swords. People assumed it was just folklore, until a maintenance engineer went to do some work on the central heating in the cellars. He heard a trumpet blast, then he saw the top of a soldier's helmet rising from the walls beside him. And then the whole column came through, a horse, and 20 Roman soldiers marching past him and out through the opposite wall. He could only see them from the knees up. He ran upstairs so fast he could barely speak, and before he could get a word out, the hotel curator looked at him and said, "By the look of you, you've seen the Romans." They later did archaeological work under the cellar floor. 18 inches down, they found it. A Roman road, running directly beneath the building, at exactly the height where the soldiers had appeared. The Romans had been there for 2,000 years. They just hadn't quite stopped marching. Some haunted houses have one ghost, maybe two. Ham House, a National Trust property beside the Thames in Richmond, is said to have 15. Ham House was built in 1610, and it was transformed in the 1670s into one of the grandest houses in Stuart England by a woman called Elizabeth Murray, who became the Duchess of Lauderdale. She was ruthless, brilliant, and politically connected at the very highest levels of the Restoration Court. She wanted Ham House to be the most lavish private home in England, and by most accounts, she succeeded. She also never really left. Visitors to the Cherry Garden on winter evenings have reported seeing figures that shouldn't be there. Dukes and duchesses, soldiers and servants, drifting through the mist. A strange scent sometimes moves through certain rooms, and old-timers say it means a presence is nearby. But the most beloved ghost at Ham House isn't human at all. It's a dog. A small puppy, said to still be running through the corridors, searching desperately for the Duchess who owned it. I know, a ghost dog. That sounds adorable until you're alone in a 400-year-old house at night and you hear small feet padding down an empty corridor. Ham House is open to visitors. I'd say go, but maybe don't go alone. In March 1970, dozens of people stormed a North London cemetery in the middle of the night. Some of them were carrying wooden stakes. This actually happened. Highgate Cemetery opened in 1839, when London was running out of places to bury its dead. Over time, it became a Gothic masterpiece. Overgrown Victorian monuments, crumbling catacombs, elaborate stone tombs, half swallowed by ivory. Karl Marx is buried here. So are George Eliot and Douglas Adams. It's beautiful, and deeply, genuinely eerie. But in the late 1960s, something else began being reported at Highgate. Visitors claimed to see a tall figure, a hat, a cape, eyes that seemed to glow red. The newspapers called it the Highgate Vampire. Then in March 1970, a television broadcast asked viewers if they believed the vampire haunted Highgate Cemetery. The response was immediate. People literally drove to Highgate that same night. Dozens climbed over the walls, several were carrying stakes. Two rival vampire hunters, a man named Sean Manchester and another named Dave Farrant, both arrived separately, each convinced that they alone were the ones destined to destroy the creature. They publicly feuded for years about who had the greater claim to the hunt. No vampire was ever found, but nobody could entirely agree on what people had seen either. The Highgate vampire case is one of the strangest paranormal stories in British history, not because of what was found, but because of how many people believed it so completely, so instantly that they grabbed a wooden stake and drove to North London at midnight. That's not nothing. That's people who saw something. Let me tell you about the most widely reported ghost in British history. She doesn't haunt one building. She haunts 5 that we know of, and everywhere she goes, the same story gets told. A woman without a head. Anne Boleyn was born around 1501. She grew up at Hever Castle in Kent, a daughter of a well-connected English nobleman. By the time she was in her late 20s, she had caught the attention of Henry VIII. And that attention would cost her everything. Henry fell obsessively in love with her. He spent 7 years pursuing her. He broke with the Catholic Church to divorce his first wife. He made Anne his queen. He had 2 miscarriages with her, and when she gave birth to a girl instead of the son he wanted, the obsession curdled into something much darker. In 1536, Anne was arrested on charges of adultery and treason, charges almost certainly fabricated. She was taken to the Tower of London and beheaded on 19th of May 1536. She was 35 years old. And according to the stories, she never stopped coming back. At Hever Castle, the home she grew up in, previous owners have reported seeing a headless woman walking the grounds. The temperatures drop in those moments. The figure disappears into the same spot every time. Anne Boleyn is the UK's most restless ghost. She's been seen at the Tower of London, Hampton Court, Blicking Hall in Norfolk, Windsor Castle, and here at Heather. Whether that tells you something about ghosts, or something about the guilt we still carry about what was done to her, I'll leave for you to decide. Whether that tells you something about ghosts or something about the guilt we still carry about what was done to her, I'll leave for you to decide. Under the street of Edinburgh's Royal Mile, there's a city that time forgot. Streets, houses, rooms, all intact, all frozen in the 17th century. They were sealed up above ground level when a new building was constructed on top of them. For 200 years, nobody went down there. When they finally opened it up, people started leaving dolls. Mary King's Close is a network of underground streets in Edinburgh's old town. In the 17th century, Edinburgh was devastated by plague. The buildings in this close were abandoned. Some say people were sealed inside them while they were still alive, though historians dispute this. What isn't disputed is that hundreds died here. When the Royal Exchange was built on top in the 1700s, the streets beneath were simply entombed. The buildings remain today, perfectly preserved under the foundations of a much grander structure above them. The most famous ghost is a little girl named Annie. During a psychic investigation years ago, a Japanese medium named Aiko Gibo claimed to make contact with a child's spirit in one of the rooms, a girl who had lost her doll. The medium found this encounter so distressing that she left in tears. And then a curious thing happened. Visitors started bringing dolls, teddy bears, small figures. They'd leave them in the room for Annie. Decades later, that tradition continues. If you visit Mary King's Close today, Annie's corner is piled with toys left by strangers who felt something, or perhaps just couldn't bear the thought of a child, real or not, being left alone in the dark. A ghost story that turned into an act of kindness. Whatever's in that room, it clearly moves people. This one is a mystery of a different kind. Not because the ghosts are terrifying, but because someone worked out exactly where they came from. Pluckley is a small, pretty village in Kent. You might know it as the setting for the Darling Buds of May. In 1989, it got a mention in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most haunted village in England, with 12 reported ghosts. The Screaming Man, the Hanging Schoolmaster, the Watercress Woman, the Highwayman at Fright Corner. But in 2025, Dr. Simon Morton, a researcher at the University of the West of England, published an academic paper that traced every single Pluckley ghost story back to its source. All of them led to one man. Frederick Sanders was a local resident who, starting in the 1940s and 50s, documented ghost stories from his grandparents, his school teacher, and other older locals. He gathered them, shaped them, published them, and in 1950 wrote an article for the local paper calling Pluckley the most haunted village in England. He named 10 ghosts. Here's the extraordinary part. When Dr. Morton checked the historical records, he found that at least 4 of the ghost stories were based on real deaths that actually happened. The Watercress Woman? A real woman named Sarah Sharp who burned to death in 1911. The Screaming Man of the Clay Pit? Richard Bridgeland, who died in a quarry accident in 1899. The Hanging Schoolmaster? Henry Edgar Martin, who took his own life in 1919. Sanders didn't invent ghosts. He took real tragedies from his community and turned them into something the village could carry forward. The deaths were real. The grief was real. The ghost stories were how people kept remembering. Is Pluckley haunted? Depends what you think haunting means. Every year, on the 19th of May, ghost hunters gather at the gates of a National Trust stately home in Norfolk. They're here for the same reason they come back every year. They're waiting for Anne Boleyn. Blicking Hall in Norfolk is where Anne Boleyn spent part of her childhood. The date? The 19th of May. The anniversary of her execution in 1536. According to the legend, as the anniversary approaches midnight, a phantom coach appears on the long drive leading to Blickling Hall. It's pulled by 4 headless horses. The coachman, also headless, guides them to the front of the house. And then Anne steps out, carrying her severed head under her arm. The coach disappears. The horses disappear. Anne walks into the hall and roams the grounds until sunrise. Then she's gone for another year. Look, headless horsemen and phantom coaches are the stuff of fairy tales. But think about the history underneath it. A woman wrongly accused, executed at 35, her body buried in an unmarked grave within the Tower of London. She's been dead nearly 500 years and people are still showing up on the anniversary. That's not nothing. That's a story that refuses to end. Glamis Castle is where the Queen Mother grew up. It's where Shakespeare set Macbeth. Sort of. It's where an entire family clan was supposedly locked in a room and left to starve to death. It's where a deformed child was allegedly hidden in a secret room for decades. And it's where someone once hung towels from every window to find a room that doesn't exist. Glamis has been in the same family since 1372, when King Robert II of Scotland gave the land to Sir John Lyon. The castle that stands today dates mostly back to the 17th century. But the site is far older. According to tradition, a Scottish king died here in 1034. The most famous ghost is Earl Beardy, a 15th century nobleman who reportedly declared one Sabbath night that he would play cards with the devil himself. A stranger appeared. They retired to a room. Shouting, swearing, crashing sounds echoed through the castle. A servant who peered through the keyhole was blinded in one eye by a flash of light. Earl Beardy, the legend says, lost his soul that night. He's still in there, in a bricked up room, playing cards for eternity. But that's almost the light-hearted one. The monster of Glamis is something darker. Victorian accounts describe a child born into the family who is described as the language is cruel by any modern standard, so severely deformed that he could not be allowed to be seen. The legend holds that he was kept hidden in a sealed room, living for decades in secret, his existence known only to the head of the family. The recorded evidence shows that a child named Thomas Bowes Lyon was born on 21st of October 1821. Records show he died the same day, but the rumours persisted for generations. Once, guests at Glamis tried to settle the question by hanging towels from the window of every accessible room in the castle. When they stepped back to look at the building from outside, several windows had no towels. The family's response? They'd removed them. Sir Walter Scott visited Glamis and wrote, "I began to consider myself as too far from the living and somewhat too near to the dead." Sir Walter Scott was not a man who scared easily. Everything on this list so far has been a castle, a palace, an ancient inn, a medieval village. Number 6 is a council house. 30 East Drive sits on the Chequerfields estate in Pontefract, West Yorkshire. It's a 1950s semi-detached, 2 bedrooms, a small front garden, exactly the kind of house millions of people across Britain grew up in. In August 1966, the patriarch family moved in. Jean and Joe, and their 2 teenage children, Philip and Diane. Within days, something was very wrong. Chalk-like dust started falling from mid-air, not from the ceiling, from shoulder height, with nothing above to explain it. Water pooled on the kitchen floor. A plumber was called and found nothing. The disturbances grew. Over the next 3 years, objects were thrown around the house. A grandfather clock flew down the stairs. Furniture moved on its own. Diane, 12 years old, was grabbed by the throat and dragged up the staircase, leaving visible bruising on her neck. When the family tried singing hymns to drive it away, the entity, which the family called Fred, floated Jean's fur gloves off the coat hook and appeared to conduct the singing. The press dubbed it Mr. Nobody. Researchers eventually called it the Black Monk of Pontefract, after multiple witnesses saw a tall figure in a dark monk's habit standing in the house. One neighbour saw it in her own kitchen, standing behind her. She said it looked completely solid. This case was written up in a 1981 book that became essential reading in paranormal circles. In 2012, it was made into a film, directed by the nephew of Gene Pitchard, who witnessed events himself as a child. The house is still there. It still runs ghost tours. At about £65 a night, visitors sign a liability waiver. The current owner discourages people from staying overnight. He owns it anyway. I think that tells you something. There's a building in the Gloucestershire market town of Watton-under-Edge that locals won't walk past at night. Not just enter. Won't walk past. The ancient Ram Inn is a medieval timber and stone building that the owners describe as the most haunted house in England. They're probably right that it is one of the oldest. Archaeologists believe the current structure dates from the late 15th century, though the site has been occupied much longer. In 1967, a man named John Humphreys bought it to save it from demolition. The council wanted to knock it down to widen a road. On his very first night inside, John said a demonic force grabbed him by the arm and dragged him across the room. He stayed for 50 years. Over those decades, he claimed to find evidence of devil worship in the fireplace, skeletal remains of children buried under the staircase, and daggers broken during rituals. He said a succubus visited him regularly. He said a Roman centurion on horseback rode through the walls. His daughter Caroline runs the building now. She describes it as having kind of evolved into an event location for paranormal activity. The building has appeared on Most Haunted, Ghost Adventures, and dozens of paranormal programs. It's the one location that even experienced ghost hunters describe as genuinely overwhelming. Now, archaeologists who have looked into the Ram Inn's history have raised skeptical questions about some of the more extreme claims. The 1145 date comes from the owner, not from independent records, and the pagan burial ground story comes from dowsers, not excavations. But here's what nobody disputes. The building is genuinely ancient. The oldest wooden window frame in Britain is inside it. It is, by any account, a deeply strange place. And whatever John Humphreys experienced in there, he chose to spend 50 years of his life in it. That's either the most dedicated man in paranormal history or the most haunted one. Number 4 is the one that has the most evidence. Not just ghost sightings, physical evidence. Something that archaeologists confirmed with a trowel. Chillingham Castle is a medieval fortress near the Scottish border in Northumberland. It's been here since the 12th century, and for hundreds of years it was on the front line of the wars between England and Scotland. The violence that passed through these walls is not legend, it's history. Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots, the Longshanks of Braveheart, used Chillingham as his base when he marched north to fight William Wallace in 1298. For decades, people sleeping in the Pink Room would hear something. Not footsteps, not creaking. Crying. The sound of a child, coming from inside the wall. Then, during a renovation of that section of the castle, workers opened up the wall. Inside, they found the bones of a small boy, wrapped in remnants of blue cloth. The crying stopped. For a while. Then guests started seeing a blue light in the Pink Room, and the crying came back. This one genuinely unnerves me. Not the ghost, the sequence. People hear crying from inside the wall for years. Someone finally opens the wall. There's a child inside. They give the child a proper burial, and it still doesn't stop. What do you do with that? Also at Chillingham, Lady Mary Berkeley, whose husband left her for her own sister, John Sage, a supposed torturer, though historians debate whether he ever existed, and in 2024, a team from IFL Science spent the night here with proper ghost hunting equipment and reported unexplained tapping, a genuine sense of unease, and absolutely nothing that could be conclusively explained. Take that as you will. Number 3 is the most famous haunted house in English history. It's also almost certainly a hoax. Almost. Borley Rectory stood in a small Essex village and was, for most of the 20th century, known as the most haunted house in England. a phantom nun walking the garden, a headless coachman driving a spectral carriage, objects flying through the air, messages scrolled on the walls. Marianne, I cannot get out. In 1929, the Daily Mirror sent paranormal investigator Harry Price to look into it. Price was famous and credible. He'd exposed fraudulent mediums, and what he found at Borley made headlines around the world. Stones thrown by invisible hands, a vase that moved on its own, spirit messages tapped out on a mirror frame. Every single thing stopped when Price left the building. The rectory's wife later said she suspected Price had fabricated the whole thing himself. He was also, it turned out, a skilled conjurer. The woman who moved in next, Marianne Foister, later admitted she had staged incidents herself, partly to cover up an affair, and in 2000, a man named Louis Mayerling came forward and said he'd been enlisted to dress up in costume and wander the Borley grounds at night to keep the legend alive. In 1956, the Society for Psychical Research reviewed all the evidence and concluded that when you analysed it carefully, the evidence for a haunting appears to diminish in force and finally to vanish away. So, that's it then. Debunked. Case closed. Except, there was a fire in 1939. And during the demolition of the ruins in 1944, workers reported seeing a ghostly woman's face in one of the crumbling walls. And films are still being made about Borley Rectory. The most recent one came out in 2025. Why won't this story die? Maybe because the truth about Borley is way more interesting than the ghost story. It's about how much we want to believe, and how easy it is for clever people to exploit that. And about how, even after the trick is revealed, some part of us still wonders. In 2003, the security cameras at Hampton Court Palace caught something. Over 3 consecutive days, the fire doors in a corridor kept flying open. On the second day, a figure appeared, long robes, pale face. It stepped forward, closed the doors, turned, and walked back into the wall. The footage was released by Historic Royal Palaces, the official body that manages Hampton Court. They called the figure the Ghost in the Cloak. The clip went around the world. Hampton Court Palace started life as a home for Cardinal Wolsey in 1514. Then Henry VIII decided he wanted it, and Wolsey didn't have a lot of options. By the 1540s, Henry had married 6 women, and 2 of them died in this building. Catherine Howard was 17 or 18 years old when Henry had her arrested for adultery in 1541. She broke free from her guards and ran down a gallery corridor toward the chapel where Henry was at prayer, screaming for him to hear her, to spare her life. The guards caught her before she reached the door. They dragged her away. She was beheaded 3 months later. The gallery she ran through is now called the Haunted Gallery. People hear screaming there. On a single day in 1999, 2 women on separate tours fainted in the exact same spot, not knowing what the other had experienced. There's more. In 1829, visitors started hearing the sound of a spinning wheel coming from inside a sealed apartment. When renovators eventually opened the wall, they found a spinning wheel hidden in a secret chamber, with nobody to explain how it had got there or when it was walled up. In 2000, a psychologist named Richard Wiseman ran a formal experiment at Hampton Court, asking both believers and non-believers to walk through the place and note any unusual experiences. Both groups reported the same things, in the same places: the haunted gallery and certain other corridors. A scientist ran a controlled experiment and found consistent, unexplained results. In the same corridor where a queen ran screaming to her death. That's Hampton Court. That's number 2. Which brings us back to where we started. The soldier, the bayonet, the figure that passed straight through. The Tower of London is nearly 1,000 years old. William the Conqueror began building it in 1078. In the centuries that followed, it was a royal palace, a treasury, a zoo, and a prison. 3 queens of England were executed here. A king was murdered at its altar. 2 young princes disappeared inside it and were never seen alive again. If anywhere in the world has earned its ghosts, it's this. Anne Boleyn was beheaded on Tower Green on 19th of May 1536. She is buried in the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. just inside the walls, and according to every ghost story told in this place for the last 5 centuries, she never left. A Victorian officer once saw a light in the chapel late at night. He climbed up to a window to look inside. What he saw was a procession. Knights and ladies in Tudor dress, moving in slow ceremony through the chapel. At the front of the procession was a headless woman he recognized from her portraits as Anne Boleyn. He watched. They paced. Then they were gone. And then there's the sentry, the one from the cold open. A guard at the Queen's house sees a white figure approaching. He challenges it 3 times, no response. He charges with his bayonet. The weapon passes clean through. He collapses. He's taken to court-martial. The officer in charge is skeptical, but 2 witnesses come forward. They watched the whole thing from a window in the bloody tower. They described exactly what the guard described. Every detail matches. He is acquitted. Over 125 people were executed in and around the Tower of London. Henry VI was murdered at his altar at midnight. The princes in the tower, 2 boys, vanished here in 1483, and what is likely their remains were found hidden under a staircase 2 centuries later. This isn't just a haunted house. It's 1,000 years of the darkest moments in British history, all stacked inside one building in the middle of London. The crown jewels are in there. The beefeaters are in there. Tourists from every country on earth walk through it every single day. And even if a fraction of the stories are true, so are the dead. 15 locations, 15 stories. Some of them debunked, some of them confirmed by archaeology, some of them genuinely inexplicable. Here's what I keep coming back to. The thing that connects all of these places isn't the ghost sightings, it's the history underneath them. Real people who died badly. Real moments of cruelty, grief, and injustice that it was so powerful they left a mark. Whether that mark takes the form of a ghost, or of a story that refuses to die, maybe the difference isn't as big as we think. If you want to know which of these places you can actually visit, I'll link them in the description. Most are open to the public, a few run ghost tours. I have not signed up for any of them. If this video got under your skin, which I hope it did, subscribe and hit that bell, because we've got more UK mysteries coming that will keep you watching way past midnight. Sleep well.